Um, yeah, so as I say, today's subject is, sorry, I keep getting things popping up that shouldn't be popping up. Today's subject is aircraft management. We do record this session, so I'd be really grateful if you could please mute your microphone. Best to turn off your video feed because obviously that can affect the bandwidth. And if you feel the need to ask any particular questions at any point, if you could please just use the chat function in Teams to do that, we'd be really very grateful. Okay, so we're going to start recording in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining. As I say, today's subject is aircraft management, and the plan is basically to just kind of get an overview of the various functionalities related to the management of the continuing airworthiness of aircraft within Aerotrac. The aircraft management stuff has been around for quite some time now. I think we first started, our first aircraft site was London Helicopters back in 2002. It's evolved hugely since then. I mean, in the original sort of versions of it, we were largely aimed at light aircraft and things like the small helicopters, R-22s, R-44s, that sort of thing. But obviously the product has just grown and grown and grown. And you can see kind of the history of the product all in the functionality. Probably the first real major change, I would say, was back in about 2019. Up until that point, really, there was no massive separation between Part 145 and the Part M. The camo functions and Part 145, well, basically, to be able to update the maintenance status of an aircraft, you had to raise a Part 145 hangar project in order to be able to clear it. That's no longer the case. I mean, Aerotrac now allows basically the camo to sit completely separate, if you like, from the 145. And as a result of that, the functionality I'm going to show you today relates specifically to that. We're going to be doing another webinar next week, which is on the aircraft maintenance side of things, the Part 145 side of things. So you're welcome to look at that. But even then, you'll be able to see in the demo we do today that there are still elements, if you like, of the 145 and the camo within the aircraft management functions. So it's never been completely separated. The two will always be sort of inextricably linked to a certain degree. So the idea, obviously, is that Aerotrac is designed to provide you with the ability to track the current maintenance status of an aircraft, to forecast future maintenance events, and also to give you the ability to look back historically and see what work has been done in the past. And the functionality really does reflect very much the diverse nature of the aircraft that have been and still are managed on Aerotrac by our customers. And as I say, that ranges from simple light aircraft and smaller helicopters right up to the bigger rotary wing aircraft and regional jets. So, as I say, as ever, the functionality really has evolved to meet the needs of the customer that use it, and we'll look at some very specific examples of that. So basically, the plan now is to do a very rapid fire run through of the process from start to finish of the camo functions, and most of that is largely in the aircraft management section of Aerotrac. So the aircraft management features of Aerotrac, they tend to break things up into from a setup point of view into three broad categories, and essentially we're going to cover them in here. So Aerotrac basically manages the continuing airworthiness in three separate ways, if you like: configuration management and configuration control, which is largely the control of the life limited components of the aircraft. There's the aircraft system of management, which is basically where we put in all the inspections and you can build a maintenance program for the aircraft. And then the publications are actually held in a slightly separate database. So we'll be running through those three key sections as part of the demo. Obviously, all of that then pulls into what we call the aircraft maintenance status or aircraft status screen, and then allows you to drive through and do forecasting. You can update the status of the aircraft in terms of its hours and cycles using the aircraft utilization functions. And then beyond that, you then start raising what we call maintenance instructions, which basically are instructions to the 145 as to what work you need carried out, and then updating that through maintenance updates, which basically says, yes, that inspection, yes, that publication has been carried out, that life limited component has been changed or overhauled or whatever. So we're going to be covering all of those in this session now. So we're going to start with the configuration management stuff. So I'm going to start here with Aerotrac. This is our demo data set. Please, as we caveat everything, don't hold us to the data that's in here. It's largely, this is our test system and we just muck around. So none of this is real, but some of it might be familiar to you in relation to some of the things that we've got going on. So the starting point for everything, as always, is not in the aircraft management section in here, but the good old part master. And I'm not going to dwell too much on it because I could spend all day just on the part master alone. But obviously, this is the driving force behind everything. You need to have a part master for the aircraft. You need to have a part master for any of the major assemblies. And you have to have part masters for every single life limited component that you're trying to control. So there's no getting away from it. The part master is key to everything. Probably the key things from an aircraft management point of view are the technical details tab. So in here, there's the ability to ATA code everything. And in particular, there's an important function here of assigning it to what we call the product group. The product groups are hugely important in relation to Aerotrac and particularly the aircraft configuration control and actually the whole of the continuing airworthiness. So one thing in relation to the part masters, it's very important for those people who are using the camo functions that this particular tab is very carefully controlled and that people don't have general access to it, because going in and just changing the product group can have pretty severe consequences in relation to the management of the aircraft. So yeah, just a general tip, shall we say. The product group basically drives technical applicability, and it's a very difficult thing to explain, an easier thing to show really, but it's one of the mandatory fields within Aerotrac on the part master. When you set up a part master, you have to assign it to a product group, and anything that would be life limited would belong to a very specific product group that represents the technical applicability of that part. It becomes a little bit clearer as we move on. You've also got all the life details information in here. So typically, every time you create the life limitations within the part, it creates a default life. But some of the OEMs in their wisdom have decided to use the same part number in a variety of different aircraft or engines. And as a result of that, occasionally you'll see the same part number having different life criteria, depending on which engine or which aircraft it's fitted to. So Aerotrac reflects that. Just one little thing, and it's a common misunderstanding, if you like, if that's the right word, in relation to it. But the product group here, that basically is what's used to control tasks that are imported against it or publications that are imported in the aircraft maintenance status. It doesn't actually have any reference to the life details of the part. When you set up a life detail against a particular part and you add that into an aircraft config, what Aerotrac will automatically do is pull in the default life of that part, regardless of whatever the product group is set here. So it actually ignores the product group that's in the technical tab. It just pulls in by default that life. If the life of the part is different, then that's where you set up these extra lives in here. And then at that point, they become product group specific. So if you're putting this into a PT6A-27 on a Twin Otter, then that's the point at which, when you're building the config, you would say it's not the default life, it's related to the life of product group E007, which is the PT6A-27. So it's a common thing that people think that the two are related, but they're not. Okay, the other thing that's hugely important, I would say, on part masters is the alternatives. Only in the sense of the fact that if you take something off of an aircraft and you want to put something back on, Aerotrac will only accept either the same part number or an alternative that's set up. Now, even if they're in no way interchangeable, to get it to work, they would need to be set as alternatives to each other. Okay, so there's the part master. The next bit is the bill of materials. This is something that perhaps in some of our customers who have been using Aerotrac for quite a long time, they don't do this so much. But one of the things that Aerotrac allows you to do is to build the assembly as a separate structure. Now, the bombs are multi-function. They're used by engine overhaul shops. They're used by manufacturers, but they're also a key part of the aircraft management control as well. So you can save yourself an awful lot of time and heartache as well by building the bombs first. So when you're building an aircraft, you start with your part masters. You can then build your bombs. The aircraft management stuff will just basically ignore a lot of the parts. It's only really interested in anything basically that's a life limited component. So you could be doing both engine and component overhaul as well as aircraft management. And the bomb in that sense is both multi-purpose. So you can have a bomb which is there for the overhaul side of the business, but Aerotrac will also just pick out the life limited components purely for the continuing in airworthiness side of things. The bombs are also really important from the point of view of driving the component log, which is another feature of Aerotrac that we'll cover very quickly towards the end. So the idea here is you just build a structure that basically is representative of that particular assembly type. After that, we'll swap over now into the admin module. So once you've built your part masters and your bombs, that's the point at which, from an administrative point of view, we go into the aircraft management side of things and set up the fleet details of anything. So this is the point at which we start putting in basically the aircraft registration details. So the fleet details will pick up the part master that's set up. And in here, basically, you just set up, well, really how you're managing the aircraft within the business. So in this case, this is an aircraft that we're both managing from a part M point of view, but we're also doing the 145. It could just be that you're 145 only, or just part M. You'll set up the maintenance type. So what's this being managed under? CASA rules, EASA, CAA, whatever. There's separate bits in terms of the functionality. So as I say, Aerotrac controls big and small aircraft. So for example, group inspections, typically you would only see that on larger aircraft. Subject to reliability, again, really only applicable to the larger MSG3 type aircraft. So various different bits that you can configure and set up in here. So there's a bunch of different sections, but perhaps most significantly is the ability to put in here or link to a maintenance program, either issued by yourself or issued by the customer. So the fleet details is really the first step, actually, in terms of building the aircraft within Aerotrac. After that, we move into the main application and we can start building the configuration. So this is something that's a little different. You don't see this in all MRO software. Aerotrac has a kind of a very rigid structure in terms of the management of the life limited components. And essentially we built what to all intents and purposes is a bomb for the aircraft. So one thing about the bill of materials, by the way, is that the bombs are really there just purely for assemblies, engines, propellers, gearboxes, whatever. You don't build a bomb for the aircraft itself. If you like, if there is a bomb as such for the aircraft, then probably the aircraft config is it, because basically it forms the structure, which is often quite typical. So once you've created an aircraft config, you can clone it and copy it to multiple aircraft of the same type, and obviously certain bits of it change. But essentially what we're doing here is just building a picture of the aircraft, of all its life limited components, what their current lives are at the point at which you're building it in Aerotrac. So the information for the aircraft goes in up here in the top, and then all the life limited components that are associated with it. And as you can see, we've got a whole series of bombs here, which are included as part of the config, which obviously they all just break out. Yeah, and if I choose the engine here, we'll see all the life limited components linked to that particular engine. So the idea obviously is to go in here, build a complete picture of all the life limited components that are within it, and set the serial numbers, the positions, the current time, whether or not they require tech log entries. So for example, the aircraft or the engines rather, within the aircraft are always going to require tech log entries and a logbook. So whenever any work is carried out, the tech log entry basically allows you to post hours against that and to be able to print out basically the hours that have been posted to the engine or whatever component you flagged as being tech log items. So, excuse me, obviously some of these things can get enormously convoluted. This is a relatively simplistic version of an Embraer E190 that we'll be looking at. Once you've built the aircraft config, you'll go in here, flag it as complete, flag it as operational. And from that point on, you should never really need to go into the aircraft config and make changes in this screen. Once that's done, it's all basically done then afterwards, well, through a combination of 145 projects and the maintenance updates. So the whole process of setting this up is just the starter for 10. Once it's in, once it's done, unless, for example, you're just trying to tweak a serial number, which is not quite right, typically there would be no reason as such to go into the config status. And you'll see if I go in and I try and edit it at the moment, if it'll let me. Sorry, this thing won't move out of the way, so I can't actually get to it. Get in, go on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, but basically the idea is that you can go into here. If you're in edit mode, it will or won't let you do stuff, because obviously if the aircraft is flagged as operational, unless the aircraft's out of service, you're not in a position to make any changes to this. But you can see it allows you to just add, remove items, clone parts. So things like the life vest, for example, you don't need to sit there and add them one by one. You can just simply clone the part one after the other. So there's a whole bunch of things that are designed to speed up the process of building the config. So once your config is complete and built, we're just going to close that out. Excuse me. You're in a position then to be able to manage all the life limited components of that aircraft config. So the next stage is to cover all the inspections, basically the maintenance program. So all the various different inspections, whether they be grouped or just simple, straightforward, what we call simplified groups. And all of that is managed in the system of management here. So that will start basically with you just building a library of all the inspection tasks that you could possibly accomplish against a particular aircraft. So I'm just going to go in here and find 05-01-12 -01. That's the one. Yeah, so here's the task card. It's just a standard task card. Now you can make this as complicated or as simplistic as you wish, really. But fundamentally, the process of what Aerotrac does, particularly from a Part M point of view, is pretty much the same. So you've got a header details, a bit of information in here. And the important bit really is the application and compliance bit. So in here, we have, this is a particular inspection. So this is an inspection on contactors and tie contactors. It's carried out on the Embraer aircraft. It's a mandatory thing that's done on a repeat basis every 500 hours, 250 landings or 6 months. So essentially you set up the periodicity in here. You can set up thresholds. So for example, this may not start until you've done 5,000 hours. And it also allows you to set a warm within period and also allow tolerances depending obviously on what you've got and agreed with the airworthiness authorities. And also you've got the ability then to apply it to product groups. Now those applications can either be against the aircraft or they can be against individual components or engines. So Aerotrac manages it at every level and breaks it down into those that are very specific to aircraft and those that are very specific to engines and components. If you choose engines and components, that's fine. But one thing to remember is that by and large, what we try to do with the engines and product groups, if you like, is to keep them very generic. So there's options not only to apply it to a specific product group, but then to break it down and take it even further and apply it to specific part numbers or serial numbers. So you can apply that part number, serial number filter here. So that's basically what drives the applicability. That's how Aerotrac will know that this task card is applicable to a specific aircraft type or component. You've then actually got the item details, and this is a bit really where you're kind of falling to some degree into the realms of the 145. Just so that you know, Obviously, the first bit of it, the application compliance, the product to application, that's all camo related. 145 would have no interest really in that as such at all. But obviously, there's functions within here that the 145 would be interested in. So the way that we've got it broken out is that the task and the task note are very much the domain of the continuing airworthiness side of things. So, for example, you'll have a simple basic inspection of what's going on. If you want to put in real detail related to it, and that's more for the 145 side of things, then they can use the engineering note. They can also reference panels, zones, they can pull in tooling, they can reference publications, or no, actually typically that's part of the camo bit, I beg your pardon. But parts and the hours, for example, that it takes to accomplish that particular task, they're all really 145 domain. And there is a way, which I'll show you in a moment, where the 145 can actually change that without affecting anything related to the continuing airworthiness side of things. So although there's elements of this which are shared, which kind of shows the way that Aerotrac developed, where the 145 and the camo were very much part of the same thing, if you like. But there is a place now where the 145 can simply go in and change the bits that affect them without having any impact on the camo side of the business. Okay. In addition to this, we've also got the ability to link these individual task cards to an AMS. Now, any task card basically can be linked to a maintenance program. In this case, yeah, this particular task is applied to the phase 1 inspection of the Embraer E190. I mean, just to explain that a little bit more, I'll quickly scoot out of here and go over into the admin section and just explain a little bit about some of the administrative setup. So I mentioned before about the fact that Aerotrac is kind of fairly aircraft specific in terms of the way that it's evolved. And there's a few sort of really good examples of that. One is, for example, the life limited or the life formulas screen. So I don't know how many of you are using this or aware of it, but obviously, particularly with the rotary wing side of the business, it's not a straight 1-to-1 ratio. When you're adding an hour to the aircraft, that doesn't automatically add an hour to every single component. And we first came across this with the Bell 412s, where basically you've got on the twin packs abbreviated cycle factors. So we created this separate life formulas capability, and now it's rolled out to all sorts of different aircraft, particularly the Leonardos, where there's a huge amount of stuff. And effectively, that actually impacts on the aircraft configuration management. So what happens is that when you add an hour and a cycle to the aircraft in the utilization section, it will use these life formulas to work out what life to add to the specific components that are listed down in here. N1, N3 creep calculations, so they're all sort of set up. I mean, a lot of the especially the rotary wing have N1, N2, N3 settings, so all of that can be built in here. And then we've got creep calculations, which I think are for the Airbus helicopters. So, but there's a whole other bunch of stuff. Approved maintenance providers. So if you're purely a camo, and you're not doing any 145 work, or occasionally some of the work is being done by a separate 145 provider, then you've got the ability to set them up here. And in the latest version 29, we've kind of gone the other way and allowed you to go in and actually set up the customers who are actually the cams. So you can put their information in here as well. That's new, I think, in 29. There's a whole bunch of other stuff which relates to well, some of the AWI functions that we're building. Aerosector, which is a web-based e-tech log system, and also some stuff related to reliability as well. And yeah, in relation to the aircraft system of maintenance stuff that we're just talking about, we've got the setups in here, so you can see we've got the ability to set up access panels, which obviously are linked on the cards. Trades and zones, again, task type, so what type of inspection is it? But probably most importantly, really, are these inspection groups. Now, these tend to only really be used on larger aircraft, your MSG3 type aircraft, but not necessarily. There are smaller aircraft. It really depends on how the OEM has built the maintenance program. But essentially, if we look at a particular product group, A011, the Embraer, you'll see that basically this is very similar to the task cards, we've just got a header which basically says, so this is the 3000 hour APU inspection, and then contained with that is the same periodicity that you would expect. And the idea is that in the main application, you're just linking those task cards to those inspection groups. So yeah, if I go back to Aerotrac, go back to my system of management, you'll see here, obviously, yes, I've just linked that particular task to that phase 1 inspection. You do that by creating a maintenance program, basically, or what we call an AMS, an aircraft maintenance schedule. And so within here, this is the aircraft maintenance schedule for the Embraer E190. You can see all the task cards that are linked in here and the various different inspections that they're linked to. So all of this is all just linked to the phase 1 inspection. That's a phase 12 inspection. So all of that information is contained in here. And the idea is basically that just provides you with a nice document that you can then provide. I'm not going to preview that one because it tends to go a bit big. I'll go for the Islander, which is obviously a lot smaller, and just preview that as a document. But the idea is that, yeah, it provides you with a document that basically you can provide to the airworthiness authorities and say, yeah, this is my default maintenance program for my aircraft. And it's just pulling in all the task cards with their periodicity. And that's the difference really between maybe some of the smaller aircraft and the larger aircraft, where with an MSG3 aircraft, the periodicity is not just managed at the grouped inspection stage, it's managed at the task card level as well. So it's a mixture of both. It gives you the flexibility basically to be able to do progressive maintenance and do stuff out of phase, if you like. So all of that is in there. I mean, just to kind of go back again to the task cards, as I say, in terms of what you've got, I've got a different task card here. If I go to H316, and in here is a task card, BK, I'll just type it, BK 7D 12N. 1, 2, no, not on that. And this is what we call a simplified group. So basically this operates slightly differently. Whereas with the Embraer, you're looking at task cards being broken up into lots and lots of separate task cards. Here we've got one single task card, which is a simplified group. And basically we've just got step-by-step operations. When you add that into a project, the significant difference is that with a grouped inspection, it'll create op numbers for each and every single task. In the case of a simplified group, it will just create one single op that you can book your time and materials to against, but there's sign-off capability for everybody in relation to how they use it. Now you can attach those to an AMS as well. There's no reason as such why you couldn't. Most people, to be honest, don't, but there's no reason that you can't. So that's the system of management side of things. After that, we've then got publications. And publications really work in a very similar way to the system of management. So if I go to the view and add section in here, go to the publications, and we're going to pick an SB from Embraer. So if I look at these, service bulletin from Embraer, you see we've got some service bulletins in here. So in this instance, we've got header details. So that's basically what's going to pull into the aircraft status. We've got the actual application. And in this instance, as I mentioned before, they can be applicable to both a component, or they could be applicable to the aircraft. It's important when you're setting the aircraft up to determine whether or not you want the publication or the inspection to be applicable to a component or to the aircraft itself. And a lot of that really is driven by the component log. If you've got something that you're going to take off, and what you want is you want that service bulletin or that inspection to go with the component that you're removing, then you would link it to the primary product group would be the component product group rather than the aircraft. In this instance, this is just referencing the fact that this publication is applicable to that component when it's fitted to that aircraft type. And then again, from a 145 perspective, you've got the ability to put hours, and you can put kits against it and all that kind of thing. So the publication stuff, but the other thing as well is because the product groups, particularly at a component level, are very generic. So it'll be a component of an Embraer E190. You have the ability then to make it very specific to particular part numbers as well. And Aerotrac uses that in terms of identifying what should and shouldn't be pulled into the aircraft status, which is basically where we're headed next. I did just mention, and before I forget, I did mention about the fact, I know this is camo, but it might be just something of interest. I did mention about the fact that the 145 can alter, if you like, the format of the task cards, and they can do that in this MRO section here under MISC card setup. So the idea here is that they can actually go in, they can pick up the task cards, and then they can just go in and they can adjust it. But you'll see that when they go to edit it, what they won't be able to do is they won't be able to unapprove the card. So they can't make any changes in relation to application. They can't make any changes in relation to periodicity. They're all just flagged and that's it. The only thing that they can change, they can't change the task or the task note, but they can change the engineering note, the panels, the zones, the tooling. I don't think they can change the publications, but they can change the parts and obviously the hours. So they have got the ability, without impacting, and certainly without that slightly annoying thing of having to unauthorize a card, make the changes, reauthorize it, and away you go. Okay. So yeah, I just thought, I know that's not specific. The MISC card, by the way, is it is to a certain degree interested to the camo. It's a place where you can go off and you can set up all sorts of other things as well. So like if you want to do a detailed document on how you process a component change or carry out a modification or incorporate some sort of service bulletin, you can build individual task cards for the 145 to carry out and accomplish that specific task. You can also set up specific task cards for the rectification of known common unscheduled defects and a whole bunch of other stuff, which I'll cover next week when we do the 145 stuff. Okay, so right, at the moment, and kind of the way that Aerotrac works is it's very much reflecting, if you like, what's in the books. So the config stuff kind of reflects what's in the IPC. The system of maintenance covers what's in the aircraft maintenance manual and any associated CMM and engine maintenance manual. And then the publications obviously is covering service bulletins, ADs from the various different airworthiness authorities. So effectively, that's just, if you like, Aerotrac reflecting what's in the books. Now's the point at which we go in and we pull all that together and get it to pull together in what we call the aircraft status. So the important thing probably to remember when particularly when you're first building aircraft in Aerotrac, is that when you go into the aircraft status, the first thing it does is it goes and it looks at the aircraft config. And in particular, it's looking at the parts in that config, and more specifically, the product groups linked to that aircraft config. So what it then does is it goes off and it looks at the publications and at the system of management, and it says, okay, any task cards and any publications that are applicable to any of the product groups, including the part number, serial number filters on those tasks and publications, and import them. So it actually just goes off and finds everything basically for you. So you don't have to add it manually. It will just automatically find it and pull it in. So including grouped inspections, the task cards themselves, any optional as required cards. So optional as required are things that they belong to the AMS, so they are part of your maintenance program, but they're not things that necessarily have any life applicability against them. They're just tasks that need to be carried out at certain specific when certain specific instances occur. So for example, there's a hard landing or a lightning strike or whatever. So these are the separate optional as required cards. You can also set up all your modifications in there. That's one of the task card types, as well as MEL. OEM publications. So obviously that's pulling in all your publications. And at this point, it's also looking directly at the aircraft config with all the life limits in there. And obviously over on the right-hand side, or left-hand side rather, It's showing a green coloured status, which obviously will vary depending on what's going on. If you look at the grouped inspections, you'll see actually the phase 12 inspection at the moment has gone red, which is obviously a bit naughty on my part, but there we are. So yeah, the full history of everything. Something I actually missed a little bit, and a lot of people, they're not really using it for a number of different reasons, I guess. But there's also a bunch of what we call additional equipment list. That's actually part of the aircraft config. Sorry, that's a bomb. If I go back to the aircraft configuration, I'll just show you. Excuse me, didn't mean to go out of there. Don't know why I went out of that. If I just exit from there, go back to the aircraft configuration status, and you'll see for the Embraer 190, in addition to the life limited components, they've also got a set of what we call additional equipment items. So typically these are high value serialized components that you may or may not want to do component removal cards on when you take them off, but they're not lifed parts in and of themselves, but it's just a way of being able to track any of the kind of the high value stuff that's moving on and off the aircraft without actually affecting the airworthiness, if you like, of the aircraft. So a lot of these things will be MEL items. But yeah, so I should have mentioned that really when I was building it. A lot of people actually will on the part master will flag those items as life and on condition. But actually, if you flag them as AEL, they don't need to be flagged as life. You can just flag them as AEL and they'll appear for you to allow them to pull into the aircraft config, but they're not life limited. Okay, what Aerotrac will do from a reliability point of view is it will track the life of the part at the point at which it went onto the aircraft and at the point at which it came off. So you can use that for reliability reporting point of view. Okay. Yeah, so I was looking at the aircraft status for AE 190. And obviously this builds up a whole history of stuff. I say there's a full history here of all the projects that you've ever raised against that aircraft, along with the related maintenance instructions, which we'll look at in a second. We can see the full defect history. Mine's not particularly brilliant, but there we are. There's a whole series of defects there. So again, we'll probably use that from a reliability reporting point of view. You can see the history of all the component changes that have been made. So if I was to go in here and just type battery, for example, it'll pick up the battery in the config. And if I view the history there, you'll see here's all the times that battery's either had some work carried out or it's been changed. Okay. And I can preview that and run that as a report. So there's the separate report. So there's a huge amount of stuff that you can review and look at in Aerotrac. More and more now, you've got the ability as well to look at that sort of stuff through the component log as well. And the component log is kind of a thing that remembers what the status of that particular assembly was the last time it was in stock. Okay, very similar to the aircraft status, shall we say, the component log, similar to the aircraft status, but for components. Okay, so, I mean, obviously, when you're building the aircraft status, as you pull this in, Aerotrac knows nothing. What it requires is that you go into each of these grouped inspections and basically either say when it's running effective from or when it was last complied. And off the back of that, Aerotrac then simply calculates what the due at field is, and it'll tell you then when it was due. So in this case, actually, this inspection was due back in February, which is a bit of a shame because I've been flying it all the way through March, that's a bit unfortunate, but never mind. It did warn me, by the way, it was telling me all the way while I was adding the utilizations about the fact that that maintenance was due. I just chose to ignore it because I could. But yeah, so full history and obviously the status of everything. So once you've built your aircraft status with all the tasks when they were last complied with, you set the thing as effective, and from that point onwards, you can then start creating forecasts. So I can forecast for the fleet, I can forecast by owner, I can forecast by a particular aircraft type or by ATA, I can forecast based on a very specific check, I can forecast based on a component or a publication. So if I want to see, for example, all the overhauls or component removals related to a particular engine type, I can run that from here. I can run based on just a preset number of hours and cycles and days, or I can go in and say, I want to see all the maintenance that's possible on this aircraft up to the end of the year based on the average flying hours of the aircraft. So there's the option basically to go in and say, maybe I'm just going to go up to the end of June, so 30th of 06, and then just go search. And Aerotrac will just go after a little bit of a search then based on the average hours of that aircraft, and it's predicting then basically what it is that you think it's going to do, and it breaks it up basically into those broad sections, if you like, of scheduled maintenance events. Anything in red is already overdue, any publications that may be due, and any config components that are going to need to be changed. So you can obviously run that report, produce that. If you've created an MI, you can actually allocate it and start it from here. I've actually already built an MI for this, so I'm going to move into that now. So that's the aircraft status, and it is really literally a one-stop shop on what the current status is, everything that's happened to it previously, and obviously what's coming up. So the next step basically is to start creating maintenance instructions. So here you'll see we've got maintenance instructions. Now, as some of you will probably know, you don't have to use maintenance instructions, but obviously from a camo perspective, we recommend it. We've made all these changes very specifically so that you've got a clear separation between the Part M and the Part 145, and at the very heart of that is the maintenance instruction. And essentially all that is just an instruction on all the tasks from a continuing airworthiness point of view that you want the 145 to carry out. When you add a maintenance instruction, it asks you, is this going to be carried out internally, or is it going to be done by a third party? You can do future plans. So the idea of that is that it doesn't really impact on the maintenance side of it, if you like. It's just purely a plan for you to be able to plug something in. So, for example, you might want to send something out to someone to say, give me a quote. If you were doing a third-party maintenance organization, you could create an internal plan to a third party and say, this is the work that I'm planning to do in 4 months' time. Give me a quote and book me a slot. So yeah, various different options there. So in this case, I've actually already raised a maintenance instruction for this particular aircraft I was looking at, my Embraer 190. But you'll see at the moment there's nothing in there. It's just literally a header that sort of says I need to do this. The aircraft is required back in service by the 30th of April. So I'm actually setting the rules to the 145 about when I need it back. And then to actually populate it, what we do is it's driven through the aircraft status screen. So I'll go into here, click on aircraft status. And in here, you'll see I've got my grouped inspections, which is flagged as red. It goes and it opens up in edit mode. I could just literally go in and just go select due maintenance and it will pick everything for me. So you'll see on the grouped inspections that ticks. I don't need to tick the individual task cards. Typically it'll pick them up. So by ticking grouped inspections, it'll automatically pick up any of the task cards basically that are linked to that grouped inspection. So all I need to do then, if there's any component changes, I can include them in there. I don't think anything is done. So if I just save that, what that will do is it will just drop back into the maintenance instruction, exiting from the aircraft status, and there they all are. So these are basically all the tasks that we need to do. And as you can see, they're pretty much all grouped by the phase 12 inspection. Plus there's a couple of other tasks as well, which are due at the same time. So I can then obviously go over that, make sure I'm happy with it. If I'm happy with it, I can push it through to the 145, so I can send them a header document basically that says, look, this is what we need to do. So here's my maintenance instruction. Obviously, I'm just doing a phase 12 inspection. You can make this detailed, so it includes all the individual tasks, or it's just literally, we're just doing a phase 12 inspection. And assuming that the 145 are happy with all of that, you can then simply confirm the instruction, and at that point, basically, you're good to go. Now, I'm not going to bother with this now. What I'll do is essentially, bang, you're off and going. You give that to the 145, and away they go. And we'll cover all of that in terms of how you manage that internally next week in next week's webinar. But for now, the next stage basically then is to update it. So as the 145 are carrying out the work, they are able to send that information back to you. So we've got the maintenance update information in here. And if I go back to one that I finished earlier, you'll see that we've got a maintenance instruction here for a scheduled inspection that was carried out. And as all that information comes back, you're simply updating basically when that task was carried out. So there's a number of different ways. If the 145 are doing it, they can actually do that through a separate screen called the project updates. So they can actually do the work for you. And they'll come back and say, yes, this was actioned at that sector record page. Or ultimately, you can have complete control of it. So the 145 can say, yes, it's done. But from your point of view, you're the ones who are actually reassigning the completion dates and whatever. The whole maintenance program, particularly anything that's calendar life, is updated using this car date, basically. So the idea is that in this continuing airworthiness requirements section, you can actually set. So for argument's sake, the 145 have been carrying out these various different tasks at various different points and signing them off. But you don't want particularly the calendar-based events to run from that particular point. You only want to run it from the point at which the aircraft was released back into service, which in this case was the 15th of March. So the idea is that you can put all that information in and away you go. So the idea is that you'll update all of that, confirm when these components were changed, or well, in that case there wasn't any, but when this scheduled maintenance was done. I think I might have another one somewhere. Let's have a look at that one. Yeah, so you can see the component changes in here. So yeah, we did these at this sector record page. You can see the details of whatever it is. There's the full complete sign-off. So if you're using, for example, the simplified groups, it's not only got the inspection task at a higher level, it's also got all the individual steps that we were looking at from a simplified group as well. So full sign-off, which is basically what we've done for the electronic sign-off that we're trying to work towards and really should be finished at some point this year. We're pretty close now in relation to that. And I'll show you a little about that in a minute. So that's the maintenance updates. Off the back of that, you can generate a logbook cert. So it'll create logbook certs for the engine and the aircraft. Yeah, which obviously is just pulling in all the details of whatever it is that you've done. The CRS obviously is one that's raised by the 145. So yeah, I mean, I think very quickly, other things as well that I've just kind of mentioned is the component log. So if we go very quickly, actually that sits in the materials section now, because technically it's kind of but it's still very much these days the domain of the camo. There's an option within Aerotrac which sort of makes it so that you can't pick parts unless you have a confirmed component log for the component. And I think particularly where you've got part numbers, if you're managing aircraft that have part numbers with multiple lives against them, i.e. it's got one life for this aircraft type and a different life for that aircraft type, like the part I showed you earlier, then I would 100% recommend that you turn that function on. So it blocks anybody just picking the parts unless someone has actually gone in and confirmed what the component log information is. And as I say, it's a very short version, if you like, of the aircraft status. You've got the header details of the gearbox here. Here's all the other life limited components that are fitted to it. Here's any associated tasks and publications that are linked to that. And basically, if you take a gearbox, for example, like this one, off of the aircraft, what the component does is it just finds all the information that's on the aircraft status and pulls it into here. So you don't lose it. And you don't have to completely rebuild that gearbox when you refit it. So maybe this gearbox has been taken off to be sent away for overhaul. When it comes back, you can put in what the life details are. You can put in what service bulletins have been incorporated at the last shop visit. And then all of that will migrate back to the aircraft when you fit it. So the component log is a hugely important feature in terms of the functionality of Aerotrac. Okay. So I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell. I've probably missed certain bits. I mean, very obviously the bit probably I missed the most notably is the utilization, where you can go in and you can put the utilization of the aircraft in here, so you can see here's all the hours and cycles that are posted to the aircraft, including what we call chaotic parts, so parts that don't have a one-to-one relationship. So the APU obviously operates differently from everything else on the aircraft. So there's the ability to put the life in separately within the utilization section. Yeah, I mean, the other thing, I guess, possibly very quickly for those of you that would need it on the larger aircraft is the reliability module. So the reliability module allows you to manage MEL. And also it just allows you to basically do a whole bunch of different defect reporting to spot trends and whatever, and produce a whole series of reports by aircraft type, by specific aircraft registration. So it's all in there basically, and it just pulls in the full history of everything. It's just looking basically at everything you've done within Aerotrac and identifying it accordingly. Okay, so very quickly, I'd just like to show you a little bit about some of the stuff that we're actually working on going forward. So I'm going to introduce you to a new feature, which is basically called the Aerotrac web interface. So this is the latest version, if you like, of Aerotrac. And certainly from an aircraft management point of view, it's functionally quite already there, if you like. There's an awful lot of functionality in that. We've actually released a new product now called MXT, which basically we've written for the light aircraft market. And yeah, basically it's just designed to help you manage the aircraft from a continuing airworthiness perspective for light aircraft from start to finish. So basically everything I've just showed you, you can do in a web-based version of Aerotrac. The main difference about the MXT is it's a managed service. So what we're actually doing is we're putting in the maintenance programs for you. We're building the aircraft configs. We're putting in the publications. So all that information is contained within there. You as a camo would still own it, if you like. So we take no responsibility, if you like, for the continuing airworthiness of the aircraft. It's basically a system designed for camos to use. But then obviously they've got the ability to be able to create maintenance instructions and then update the status of the aircraft. There's no stock or part 145 functionality. It's purely camo. And some of that is reflected in here. You'll see we've got an aircraft management section. Oh, I just need to log in again. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. Sorry, yeah, it's just going to reload it. There we go. So welcome to the AWI. Yeah, so from an aircraft management point of view, there's a couple of things I think that probably would be of particular interest. You can see about the fact we've got the maintenance instructions and maintenance updates and all that. Probably the biggest things really that I think add most value. At the moment, Aerotrac 250, first thing to say is Aerotrac 250 doesn't go away. This information that's in the AWI is reading directly from Aerotrac version 250. So this is not an application in itself. It's purely at the moment reliant on Aerotrac version 250 being in existence, and that's where it's dragging the data from. But whereas with 250 you can only really see the individual aircraft, here you can actually see basically the whole fleet. Not only that, you can also give this to your customers so they can see their aircraft and the operational status of it if you're managing it for them on their behalf. They can only see their aircraft. They can't see anybody else's. Obviously, that's a kind of a prerequisite. And obviously, this is just showing you there's maintenance due on nearly all this aircraft because we haven't touched this for a while. At the moment, what we're actually doing is we're just trying to develop Aerotrac. Oh, sorry, yeah, I'm actually missing something. I was looking for a particular aircraft, but it seems to have gone missing. Where is it? Oh, no, I've got to keep going down. Oh, there we go. VHAGM. So in here, yeah, we can see that this is all kind of web-based stuff. We can see the last flights on the aircraft. We can see average hours. We can reference manuals with all the technical reference over here, so we can go through to the Pilatus things. One of the other things that the AWI has is it has a document management system within it. So if I click on here, we actually see the maintenance program that's in operation for this aircraft at this particular point in time. And that isn't off like at the moment in Aerotrac 250, you've got linked documents. This is actually embedded within the aircraft, within the Aerotrac database itself. So all of this stuff, and that's one of the features of MXT. Not only is it managing the aircraft on a web-based system, but it's actually got a separate document management system that allows you to keep track of all the task cards that have been signed off by the engineers, the maintenance program that you're operating, and so on. So all of that is all contained within here. Sorry, yeah, I just need to close that out, I think. Close that off, don't come right out. There we go. And also it's got the aircraft status, so we can see the grouped inspections, all the task cards, mods, publications, basically the same thing you can see in 250. You can see all the defects. You can do a maintenance forecast from here. You can even add utilizations in here. So the utilizations will come in one of two ways. Well, 3 ways. you'll either read back where you put them in as normal in Aerotrac. You can add them in here through the AWI, so you can actually put in the utilizations to a separate utilization section. And in this particular instance, it's using the Aerotrac e-tech log, which we call Aerosector. So actually, there's a separate application, web-based, which the pilot has on his tablet, and basically he just tracks his flying hours. It links to the aircraft. It does a whole series of checks on him, so he can't go flying if the aircraft's not serviceable, if he hasn't done the daily check. He records the uplifts on fuel and oil and all that kind of thing. So it's a very, very intense piece of software, shall we say. The document management stuff that we were talking about, that's all in here. So there's all sorts of things that basically you can link to: approval certificates, continuing airworthiness requirement forms, batch notes for your incoming stock. So this is something that actually we're planning to release very, very soon to all our customers, whether they're using the Part M functionality or not. Because obviously one of the things that people have in common is document management and reports. So they're the aspects that we're going to make generally available with the AWI very soon. And the other thing as well, I think, from an aircraft management point of view, probably is the fleet forecast. So this is a kind of nicer way of looking at the fleet forecast. You can filter by all sorts of different things, but basically this is just using the average flight hours and reading in basically all the different checks that are due on those particular aircraft. So I mean, if I go down here and go to VH AGM, so literally it's just a kind of schematic, if you like, that tells you this is all the things that are due. Have you raised an MI for that yet? Yeah. So a bit like the maintenance forecast, but in a more graphic form that you can click on and do stuff with. So yeah, I thought I would at least give you an idea of the fact that that exists. There's a whole pile of stuff we can have a look again next week in relation to the 145 planning side of things. So we'll probably cover some of that as well. But yeah, I mean, we're really building towards basically replacing the existing version of Aerotrac with this. And at the moment, we're actually developing a test case where effectively this is instead, at the moment, if you were to try to do the AWI, this would be housed locally. But the plan is, and what we're doing at the moment, the programmers are working on it right now, is to build a test database for us to actually be able to offer this as a software as a service, which is essentially what we've done with MXT. So it's not sat on your server, it's actually out there in the cloud, a bit like the accounting software that you're probably using or whatever else. So we're just in the test phase of that at the moment to make sure that all works tickety-boo. So yeah, lots going on. I mean, that's pretty much it in terms of the overview. I'm sure there's lots of other bits and bobs, but obviously we'd be here for a week if I was to cover absolutely everything. But please, if there are any questions at all.
Thomas Hill is just typing something in the chat, so I don't know if he wants to push that through or actually just ask the question. Okay, Tom. Yeah.
I was going to say, actually, I've got a dash. That's what I was typing in there. But thank you very much, Patrick. A great webinar.
No problem, guys. Yeah, I think I've managed to pretty much land that on time as well. So apologies if I was going very quick, but there you go. Hopefully that was helpful and useful. Any other questions? Thanks, Tom, by the way, for joining.
Hi, Patrick. Here, Simone from Italy.
Hi, Simone.
Hi.
Good to speak with you.
Yes, maybe I lost this information. How to use the data importers for the task card and the group inspection creation?
What, in terms of, yeah, I mean, I didn't actually cover the data importer bit, but yeah, are you referring to this bit, Simone? So if we go back to Aerotrac 250, you've got the importers and yes, you do the data importer. Yeah, I mean, essentially it's all done through this aircraft system of management bit. So yeah, in terms of pulling in all those task cards, yeah, sorry, I apologize. I probably should have mentioned that, but then I'd have overrun.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, obviously that's a key bit of it, really, in terms of, you know, sitting there typing in thousands of task cards one by one. Most often people have got their maintenance programs already knocked up in an Excel format. That's not unusual. So the idea is that we can take that, manipulate it, And what you have is a specific template, basically, that says this is how you need to formulate the data within Aerotrac in order to be able to import it. So we've got some really good detailed books that Andy Furthermore has written for us in relation to how to populate these and where it all pulls in and what it looks like when it goes into Aerotrac. So if you're looking at doing that, Simone, yeah, that's probably the best place to look. You can find all of that in the online help section. If you go in and say, how do I import maintenance tasks or scheduled inspection tasks into the system of management, if you type that into to the info bot, it'll probably push you to the very exact document that you need to read.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Patrick.
But
Grazie.
yeah, it's in that data importer section in there, mate, under aircraft system of management. Please, if anybody's got any very specific questions, you're welcome to just come to us. I mean, probably the best thing to do, I would suggest, is maybe just go through the support log from a PPC point of view. But if you need pointing in direction on anything that we've covered today, then please do just reach out and just drop us a support log.
Okay, grazie.
Okay. Fabulous. Well, thank you ever so much, everybody, for joining. I mean, I'll just sort of finish off with my thing here. So we covered all those subjects. Thanks, as I say, for attending. If we could, obviously, what we're going to do is we're going to put this recording up onto the website. There's a QR code there, which I think Warwick will also put up. And if it's possible, we'd love, obviously, your reviews to let you know or to get feedback from you as to whether this was a useful session or not. Hopefully you learned something useful from it. And we look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place. Thank you very much.